The fluorescent lights of Columbia Presbyterian Hospital cast long shadows across the transplant ward as Dr. Kim adjusted his surgical cap for what seemed like the 100th time that week. At 52 years old, he had performed countless operations, but there was something about the case waiting for him that made his hands pause over the patient file. Brian Seaman, age 53, sat in the consultation room with his wife Marianne, their fingers intertwined like lifelines in a storm. 37 years of diabetes had carved deep lines around Brian's eyes, but it was the quiet determination in his gaze that caught Dr. Kim's attention. This wasn't just another case. This was a man fighting for a second chance at life. "Mr. Seaman," Dr. Kim said, settling into his chair with the gentle authority that had earned him the nickname Dr. Miracle throughout the hospital corridors. "I've reviewed your file. Your journey has been challenging." Brian's laugh was hollow. "That's one way to put it, document. Since I was 16, my body's been at war with itself. First the diabetes, then the heart surgery, 18 months on dialysis, and now this." He gestured to the melanoma scar on his shoulder, a reminder of yet another battle fought and won. Marianne squeezed her husband's hand tighter. She had watched the man she loved slowly fade away, his vibrant spirit dimmed by the constant struggle against his failing organs. The National Registry would take years, time Brian didn't have. They needed a miracle, and sitting across from them was the man known for delivering exactly that. Dr. Kim leaned forward, his eyes never leaving Brian's face. "I won't lie to you. What we're considering, a blood-type incompatible kidney transplant followed by a pancreas transplant. It's risky. But I've seen miracles happen in this hospital. I've been part of them." The silence stretched between them like a bridge over an abyss. Brian's future hung in the balance, suspended between hope and despair. In the distance, the steady beep of monitors created a rhythm of life continuing, fighting, surviving. "Doctor," Brian finally said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I've been living on borrowed time for decades. I'm ready to take the risk if you are." Dr. Kim smiled, the expression transforming his serious features. "Then let's write your miracle together. If you're fighting your own battle with chronic illness, remember, sometimes the most extraordinary transformations begin with a single decision to keep fighting." Subscribe to hear how courage and cutting-edge medicine can change everything. The memory hit Brian like a physical blow every time he thought about it. 16 years old, collapsing at his after-school job, the world spinning into darkness. One moment he was stocking shelves, dreaming about weekend plans and girls, and the next he was waking up in a hospital bed with a diagnosis that would reshape his entire existence. Type 1 diabetes, the doctor had said, the words falling like stones into still water. "You'll need insulin shots every day for the rest of your life." Dr. Kim studied the file, recognizing the familiar story of childhood interrupted by chronic disease. He had seen it countless times. The moment when a young person's life splits into before and after, when freedom becomes a memory and survival becomes a daily ritual. Brian's parents had been devastated. His mother cried for 3 days straight, convinced she had somehow failed her son. His father buried himself in research, determined to understand this invisible enemy that had invaded their family. But it was Brian who surprised everyone with his resilience. "I remember the first time I gave myself an insulin shot," Brian told Dr. Kim during one of their consultations. "My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the needle. But I knew if I didn't do it, I'd end up back in that hospital bed." The teenage years that should have been filled with reckless abandon became a careful dance of blood sugar monitoring, carbohydrate counting, and constant vigilance. While his friends stayed out late and ate pizza without a second thought, Brian carried glucose tablets in his pocket like worry stones. Dr. Kim had seen this pattern before, the way chronic illness aged people prematurely, not just physically but emotionally. These patients developed a wisdom about mortality that their peers wouldn't understand for decades. "You became a man at 16, Dr. Kim observed, and Brian nodded grimly. The episodes came without warning. Low blood sugar could strike anywhere, anytime. Brian learned to recognize the warning signs, the shakiness, the confusion, the way the world seemed to tilt on its axis. But sometimes the warnings came too late. At work, at school, at family gatherings, Brian would suddenly find himself disoriented and dizzy, his colleagues and classmates looking at him with mixture of concern and confusion. Each episode was a reminder that his body was betraying him, that the insulin he injected daily was both his salvation and his prison. Marian entered his life during college, and Dr. Kim could see in Brian's eyes how that had changed everything. She didn't see him as a diabetic who happened to be a person. She saw him as a person who happened to have diabetes. "She never made me feel broken," Brian said, and Dr. Kim understood. Love, true love, had the power to heal wounds that medicine couldn't touch. But even love couldn't stop the relentless march of complications that diabetes brings. The disease was patient, methodical, slowly attacking Brian's cardiovascular system with surgical precision. 20 years passed like pages in a medical textbook, each one documenting the subtle ways diabetes was reshaping Brian's body from the inside out. Dr. Kim had seen the scans. Brian's heart at 45 looked like a road map of damage, arteries narrowed by years of high blood glucose levels creating microscopic warfare throughout his cardiovascular system. The quadruple bypass surgery had been inevitable, but that didn't make it any less terrifying for the man lying on the operating table. For arteries, the cardiac surgeon had explained to Marianne in the waiting room, "We're essentially rebuilding the highway system around his heart." But Dr. Kim knew that cardiac surgery for diabetic patients was just the beginning, not the solution. The underlying disease continued its relentless assault even as surgeons rerouted blood flow around damaged vessels. It was like fixing the plumbing in a house while the foundation slowly crumbled. Brian's recovery was complicated by his diabetes. Where other patients healed in predictable timelines, his body struggled to repair the surgical trauma. High blood glucose levels interfered with wound healing, creating a frustrating cycle where the very condition that necessitated the surgery also prevented optimal recovery. Marianne became his anchor during those dark months. She learned to read his blood pressure cuffs, to recognize the subtle signs of infection, to navigate the complex medication schedules that kept him alive. Dr. Kim had seen many marriages crumble under the weight of chronic illness, but theirs seemed to grow stronger. "She never once complained," Brian told Dr. Kim. "Even when I was at my worst, when I couldn't even shower myself, she was there." The real crisis came 18 months later. Brian woke up one morning, and his feet were swollen like balloons. His face was puffy, his breathing labored. Marianne took one look at him and drove straight to the emergency room. "Kidney failure," the nephrology team announced after reviewing his blood work. The numbers told a story of organs shutting down, of filtration systems overwhelmed by decades of metabolic chaos. Dr. Kim understood the devastating progression. Diabetes was like a silent assassin, methodically destroying the tiny blood vessels in the kidneys until they could no longer perform their essential function of cleaning the blood. The medical term was diabetic nephropathy, but to Brian, it felt like his body was poisoning itself. Dialysis became his new reality. 3 times a week, he would sit in a chair for 4 hours while a machine did the work his kidneys could no longer perform. The process was exhausting, leaving him drained and disoriented. "I felt like I was disappearing," Brian confided to Dr. Kim. "Like the machine was taking away pieces of who I used to be." The dialysis center became a strange community of the chronically ill. Brian formed friendships with other patients, sharing stories and dark humor while their blood circulated through machines that kept them alive. Some patients had been on dialysis for years, their lives organized around the rigid schedule of treatments. But Dr. Kim knew that dialysis was a bridge, not a destination. For patients like Brian, a kidney transplant wasn't just a treatment option. It was the difference between living and merely surviving. The waiting began immediately. Brian's name went onto the National Registry, joining thousands of others hoping for the gift of a kidney from a deceased donor. The statistics were sobering. The average wait time was 3 to 5 years, and many patients died waiting. Time became both an enemy and an ally, each day on dialysis buying Brian time, while simultaneously wearing down his already compromised system. Just when Brian and Marianne thought they had mapped out their battle plan, fate dealt them another devastating blow. During a routine examination, Dr. Kim's colleague noticed a small, irregularly shaped mole on Brian's shoulder, a melanoma that would delay his transplant eligibility indefinitely. "Cancer," the dermatologist said, and the word hung in the air like smoke from a fire they couldn't see but knew was burning. For a man already fighting multiple organ failures, the diagnosis felt like cosmic cruelty. Dr. Kim watched Brian's face crumble as the oncology team explained the treatment protocol. Surgery to remove the melanoma, followed by months of monitoring to ensure it hadn't spread. Only after being declared cancer-free for a full year could he be considered for transplant surgery. "I can't wait another year," Brian whispered to Marianne that night. "I don't have another year." But Marianne, the woman who had stood by him through decades of medical battles, refused to let despair win. She researched treatment centers, sought second opinions, and advocated for her husband with the fierce determination of a warrior protecting her wounded soldier. Dr. Kim admired her tenacity. In his years of practice, he had learned that healing required more than medical expertise. It demanded a team of people who refused to give up. Marianne was the general in Brian's army of recovery. The cancer surgery was successful, but the waiting period felt like suspended animation. Brian continued his dialysis treatments while oncologists monitored his blood for any sign that cancer cells were circulating through his system. Every test was a roll of the dice, every clear result a small victory. During this period, Dr. Kim maintained contact with the family, checking in on Brian's progress and planning for the eventual transplant surgery. He could see the toll that uncertainty was taking on both husband and wife. "Some days I feel like I'm planning my own funeral," Brian admitted during one visit. The constant medical appointments, the insurance battles, the exhaustion, it all combined to create a life that felt more like survival than living. But Dr. Kim saw something else in Brian's eyes, a stubborn refusal to surrender. 37 years of living with diabetes had taught him that the body could endure far more than the mind believed possible. The cancer-free milestone came just as Brian turned 53. 1 year without any sign of melanoma recurrence. The oncology team signed off on his transplant eligibility with cautious optimism. However, a new problem emerged: time. The traditional route through UNOS and the National Registry would take years Brian didn't have. His kidney function was deteriorating rapidly, and the dialysis was becoming less effective. "We need to think outside the box," Dr. Kim told the transplant team during their weekly meeting. "This patient needs a living donor." The search for a living donor began within Brian's family. His niece volunteered first, young and healthy with perfect kidney function. But Dr. Kim gently explained why that wouldn't work. She wanted to have children, and pregnancy after donating a kidney carried additional risks. Brian's older sister stepped forward next, but her own medical history of Parkinson's disease and cancer made her unsuitable. The family felt the weight of genetics and bad luck pressing down on them. Then Debbie, Brian's other sister, offered her kidney, and everything changed, except for one crucial detail that would require Dr. Kim to perform medical magic. Debbie Seaman was the picture of health at 55, active, energetic, with kidney function that would make someone half her age jealous. She had watched her younger brother struggle for decades and was determined to save his life. There was just one problem: her blood type was incompatible with Brian's. In most hospitals, this would have been the end of the conversation. Blood type compatibility has been a fundamental rule of organ transplantation since the field began. When blood types don't match, the recipient's immune system attacks the donated organ like it's a foreign invader, leading to immediate rejection and potentially fatal consequences. But Dr. Kim wasn't most doctors. "There's a way around this," he told the family during a consultation that would change everything. "It's called plasmapheresis, and it's going to allow us to essentially reset Brian's immune system." Marianne leaned forward in her chair, hope flickering in her eyes for the first time in months. "What does that mean exactly?" Dr. Kim explained the groundbreaking procedure with the patience of a teacher and the excitement of a pioneer. Plasmapheresis would work like an advanced form of dialysis, separating Brian's blood into its component parts and removing the antibodies that would cause him to reject Debbie's kidney. "We'll filter out the incompatible antibodies and replace them with compatible plasma," he said, sketching diagrams on his notepad. "It's like giving your immune system amnesia about blood types." The procedure was still relatively new in 2008, and many transplant centers wouldn't attempt it. But Dr. Kim had been studying the technique for years, waiting for the right patient and the right circumstances. Brian stared at his sister, seeing not just a donor, but a woman willing to undergo surgery to save his life. "Debbie, are you sure about this? It's major surgery, and there are risks." Debbie's response was swift and certain. "Brian, you're my baby brother. I've watched you fight this disease for 37 years. If I can give you a chance at a normal life, then yes, I'm sure." The weeks leading up to the surgery became a carefully choreographed medical dance. Brian underwent extensive testing to ensure his body could handle the transplant. Meanwhile, Debbie completed her own battery of tests to confirm she was healthy enough to donate. Dr. Kim coordinated with specialists across multiple departments: nephrology, immunology, anesthesiology, and surgical nursing. Every detail had to be perfect because they were venturing into relatively uncharted medical territory. The plasmapheresis treatments began 1 week before the scheduled surgery. For 9 hours each night, Brian was connected to a machine that slowly cycled his blood, removing the antibodies that would cause rejection. It was exhausting and uncomfortable, but each session brought him closer to freedom. Marianne rented an apartment near the hospital, creating a temporary home base for the extended family who had come to support Brian and Debbie. The apartment filled with relatives, friends, and well-wishers, creating an atmosphere of nervous anticipation. It felt like we were preparing for the most important event of our lives, Marianne later told Dr. Kim. Because we were. Dr. Kim spent the evening before surgery reviewing every aspect of the procedure. He had performed hundreds of kidney transplants, but each patient was unique, each surgery a new combination of medical science and human hope. As dawn broke over the hospital, two siblings prepared to literally share life with each other in the most profound way possible. The operating room at Columbia Presbyterian buzzed with the quiet energy of a team preparing for something extraordinary. Dr. Kim scrubbed his hands methodically, each movement practiced and precise, while his surgical team prepared for what would be 2 simultaneous operations, removing a healthy kidney from Debbie and transplanting it into Brian. At 6 a.m., both siblings were wheeled into adjacent operating rooms. Debbie squeezed Brian's hand as their gurneys passed in the hallway. "See you on the other side, baby brother," she whispered. Dr. Kim had assembled his best team for the procedure. In one room, his colleague would carefully remove Debbie's left kidney through a minimally invasive laparoscopic approach. In the other room, Dr. Kim would prepare Brian's body to receive the gift his sister was providing. The plasmapheresis treatments had worked better than expected. Brian's antibody levels were low enough that the transplant could proceed safely. His blood work showed a man whose body was finally ready to accept help. "His kidney function is at 8%, Dr. Kim announced to the surgical team as they began. "This organ needs to work immediately, or we're in serious trouble." The surgery to remove Brian's failed kidneys was delicate work. 37 years of diabetes had left scar tissue throughout his abdomen, making every cut and suture more challenging than normal. But Dr. Kim's hands moved with the confidence born of thousands of procedures. Meanwhile, Debbie's surgery proceeded smoothly. Her kidney was healthy, pink, and perfect, exactly what her brother needed. The organ was carefully preserved in a special solution that would keep it viable during the transplant procedure. The most critical moment came when Dr. Kim connected Debbie's kidney to Brian's blood vessels. This was the moment of truth. Would the organ accept its new home, or would Brian's immune system launch an attack despite all their preparation? "Clamps coming off," Dr. Kim announced to the room. "Let's see what we've got." The surgical team held their collective breath as blood began flowing through the transplanted kidney. Within minutes, they had their answer. Urine began flowing from the organ, clear and yellow, the most beautiful sight Dr. Kim had seen in weeks. "We've got function," he called out, unable to suppress the excitement in his voice. The kidney wasn't just working. It was working beautifully, filtering Brian's blood and producing urine at a rate that indicated excellent immediate function. In the recovery room, Brian slowly emerged from anesthesia to find Dr. Kim standing beside his bed, beaming with satisfaction. "You're peeing like a racehorse, kid," Dr. Kim said with a grin. "Your new kidney is working perfectly. Now we need to talk about getting you a new pancreas." Brian's foggy mind struggled to process the information. The kidney transplant was successful, but Dr. Kim was already planning the next phase of his transformation: a pancreas transplant that would cure his diabetes entirely. A new pancreas means no more insulin shots, no more blood sugar monitoring, no more diabetes, Dr. Kim explained. And it will protect your new kidney for decades to come. The recovery process was remarkable. Within days, Brian felt more energetic than he had in years. The constant fatigue of kidney failure lifted like fog clearing on a sunny morning. He could think more clearly, breathe more easily, and for the first time in 18 months, he wasn't tied to a dialysis machine. Debbie recovered quickly from her donation surgery, proud of the role she had played in her brother's transformation. The surgical team monitored both siblings carefully, but both were healing beautifully. "I feel like I gave him more than a kidney," Debbie told Marianne. "I gave him his life back." But Dr. Kim knew that one miracle was just the beginning. The pancreas transplant would complete Brian's transformation from chronically ill patient to healthy man. 1 year after his kidney transplant, Brian returned to Dr. Kim's office as a changed man. His color was better, his energy restored, and his new kidney was functioning flawlessly. But they both knew this was just the intermission in his medical story. "Are you ready for the final act?" Dr. Kim asked, reviewing Brian's latest test results. "Because your body is telling me it's time for a pancreas." The pancreas transplant was an even more complex procedure than the kidney surgery. While kidney transplants had become routine, pancreas transplantation was still considered pioneering medicine in 2009. Dr. Kim would be among the first surgeons in the country to perform this life-changing operation. "Explain it to me again," Marian said, taking notes as Dr. Kim outlined the procedure. She had become an expert patient advocate over the years, learning medical terminology that most people never encounter. "A functioning pancreas will produce insulin naturally," Dr. Kim explained, drawing diagrams on his tablet. "Brian will go from being insulin-dependent to essentially cured of diabetes. The pancreas will also protect his new kidney, and together, both organs should last for decades." The donor pancreas came from a young person who had died tragically in an accident, a family's grief becoming Brian's salvation. Dr. Kim never forgot that every organ transplant represented both loss and hope, death and rebirth. The surgery itself was a masterpiece of precision. Dr. Kim had to connect the donor pancreas to Brian's digestive system, ensuring that the organ could both produce insulin and digestive enzymes. Every blood vessel connection had to be perfect, every suture placed with meticulous care. "This is the most complex surgery I've performed this year," Dr. Kim confided to his surgical team as they worked. "We're not just replacing an organ, we're curing a disease that's defined this man's entire adult life." The operation took 8 hours. Brian's family waited in the surgical lounge, watching the clock and praying to whatever gods might be listening. Marianne paced the halls, unable to sit still while the man she loved underwent such a risky procedure. When Dr. Kim finally emerged from the operating room, his scrubs soaked with perspiration but his face radiant with success, the waiting family knew immediately that the news was good. "The pancreas is working beautifully," he announced. "Brian is officially no longer diabetic." The words hung in the air like music. After 37 years of insulin injections, blood sugar monitoring, and dietary restrictions, Brian was finally free from the disease that had shaped his entire life. Recovery from pancreas transplant was more challenging than the kidney surgery. The organ had to heal while immediately performing its complex functions. But Brian's body embraced the new organ like it had been waiting for this moment for decades. Within weeks, his blood sugar levels stabilized without any insulin intervention. His body was producing its own insulin for the first time since he was 16 years old. Dr. Kim monitored him carefully, adjusting anti-rejection medications and watching for any signs of complications. "I keep waiting for something to go wrong," Brian admitted during a follow-up visit. "This feels too good to be true." But Dr. Kim had seen this before. Patients so accustomed to illness that health felt foreign and suspicious. "Your body is remembering what normal feels like," he reassured Brian. "Trust the process." The transformation was remarkable. Brian began exercising regularly, walking 4 to 6 miles daily and riding his bicycle for the first time in years. His energy levels soared, his mind cleared, and his zest for life returned with a vengeance. "I feel like I'm meeting myself for the first time," Brian told Dr. Kim during one of their appointments, and the surgeon knew exactly what he meant. 6 months after his pancreas transplant, Brian Seaman walked into a restaurant with Marianne for what should have been an ordinary dinner. But for a man who had spent nearly 4 decades managing a chronic illness, nothing about this evening was ordinary. As they waited for their table, a former co-worker approached with a shocked expression. "I can't believe it's you," the man said, staring at Brian as if seeing a ghost. "I heard you were really sick. I thought you had died." Brian's response came with a smile that lit up his entire face. "Well, I'm alive and well, and about to have a really great meal." Dr. Kim had watched this transformation with the satisfaction of an artist completing a masterpiece. The man who had entered his office 2 years earlier, exhausted, dialysis-dependent, and fighting multiple organ failures, had become someone entirely new. "The change in you is remarkable," Dr. Kim told Brian during their latest follow-up appointment. Your kidney function is excellent, your pancreas is producing perfect insulin levels, and your overall health markers are better than men half your age. Brian's new routine would have seemed impossible just years before. He woke each morning and walked between 4 and 6 miles, his transplanted organs providing the energy his body had been missing for decades. He rode his bicycle through Connecticut countryside, visited art museums with Marianne, and planned trips to local wineries. "I'm living the life I always imagined but never thought I'd have," Brian told Dr. Kim. "For the first time since I was 16, I'm not a diabetic who happens to be a person. I'm just a person." The medical team continued monitoring both transplanted organs carefully. Brian took immunosuppressive medications daily to prevent rejection, but these were a small price to pay for the freedom he had gained. His blood work showed organs functioning flawlessly, working together to maintain his health. Debbie visited regularly, proud of her role in her brother's transformation. The kidney she had donated was thriving in its new home, partnering with the transplanted pancreas to give Brian a quality of life none of them had dared to hope for. "When I see how well he's doing, I know it was worth every moment of worry," Debbie said. "He's got his life back, and our whole family got our Brian back." Dr. Kim reflected on the case during his quieter moments. In a career filled with medical victories and defeats, Brian's story represented something special: the intersection of cutting-edge medicine, family love, and human determination. The boy who had lost his childhood to diabetes at 16 had finally become the man he was always meant to be. The husband who had struggled through decades of complications was now planning adventures with his devoted wife. The patient who had faced death multiple times was now truly living for the first time in his adult life. Today, more than a decade later, Brian Seaman continues to thrive with his transplanted kidney and pancreas functioning perfectly. His story has become legendary at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, inspiring other patients facing similar battles and reminding the medical team why they chose careers dedicated to healing. Dr. Kim still sees Brian for regular follow-ups, marveling at the sustained success of both transplants. "He's become one of our greatest success stories," the surgeon reflects. "Not just medically, but as an example of what's possible when cutting-edge medicine meets unbreakable human spirit." The key lesson from Brian's journey transcends medicine. It's about the power of refusing to surrender, even when facing seemingly impossible odds. His transformation from a chronically ill patient to a healthy, active man in his 60s proves that miracles don't just happen. They're created through the collaboration of skilled doctors, devoted families, and patients who refuse to give up. Marianne and Brian continue to advocate for organ donation, sharing their story with others facing similar battles. They understand that Brian's second chance at life came through the generosity of donors and the courage of family members willing to literally give part of themselves. For anyone fighting chronic illness, Brian's message is simple but powerful. Keep fighting, trust your medical team, and never underestimate the healing power of love and determination. Sometimes the most extraordinary transformations require the most challenging journeys. Your battle may feel overwhelming today, but remember, every morning brings new possibilities for healing, hope, and the chance to write a different ending to your story. The boy who lost his childhood to diabetes became the man who conquered it entirely, proving that with the right team and unwavering determination, even the most devastating diagnoses can be transformed into stories of triumph.